What you are about to discover was not simply lost to time, it was deliberately erased. It was buried under the foundations of empires and silenced in the halls of councils, for it revealed the true nature of the great enemy, not as a future monster, but as a system of control that was already being built around us, a cage of consciousness disguised as salvation. For centuries, we have been taught to look to the horizon, to scan the future for a charismatic tyrant, a single figure upon whom all the world's darkness would one day converge. We were given a face, a name, a prophecy of a distant doom, all to keep our eyes from turning inward and from looking at the very structures that claim to be our protectors. This is the first layer of the illusion, the grand distraction. And tonight we begin to peel it back. This ancient mystery begins not with a bang, but with a whisper, a question that has echoed in the silent chambers of the human heart for generations. Have you ever felt it? A deep and unsettling dissonance between the spiritual stories you were told and the truth your soul recognizes. A feeling that a vital piece of the puzzle was missing, perhaps even stolen. This feeling is not an illusion. It is an ancestral memory, a faint signal from a forgotten legacy, calling you to look deeper. It is the echo of a truth so profound and so dangerous to the systems of power that they dedicated centuries to ensuring you would never hear it, a truth that redefines the battle between light and shadow, not as a future cosmic war, but as a constant, intimate choice we make every single day. Our journey does not take us to the familiar corridors of Rome or the contested grounds of Jerusalem. Instead, it leads us south, beyond the deserts, to the mist-shrouded highlands of ancient Ethiopia. Here, in the heart of the kingdom of Aksum, one of the first great empires to embrace the light of the Christos, a different current of wisdom flowed. It was a stream that ran pure and deep, untouched by the political ambitions and doctrinal compromises that would soon muddy the waters in the West. In monasteries carved from living rock, a lineage of silent guardians preserved a collection of sacred texts far more ancient, more complete, and more spiritually untamed than anything the rising powers of the Roman Hellenic world would allow to survive. They were the custodians of a knowledge so potent it could dissolve the very foundations of control. This hidden knowledge, this lost truth, was a key, not a key to predicting the future, but to decoding the present. It offered a revelation that empowered the individual spirit over the institution, direct experience over dogmatic belief. It taught that the ultimate adversary was not a man who would one day seize a throne, but a counterfeit consciousness that seeks to sit on the throne of your own inner temple. It is the spirit of empire that demands worship, the voice of materialism that severs us from our divine source, the system of fear that trades our sovereignty for a hollow promise of security. What would change within you if you discovered that you have been taught to fight a phantom in the future, only to avoid seeing the chains being forged in the now? This is the beginning of that discovery. We are about to unlock a sacred chronicle, a piece of our collective soul that was intentionally hidden from us. This is not a story of history alone. It is the story of your own awakening, a map back to a power and a perception that is your birthright. The revelations that will unfold are not meant to bring fear, but clarity. They are a torch handed down through millennia by those who kept the flame alive in the dark. If you feel the call to uncover the truths that have been intentionally hidden, to reclaim a memory that beats within your own blood, then remain with us. Your journey into the heart of this forgotten legacy begins now. Subscribe to this channel and let us walk this path together, beyond the veil of the known. To understand the depth of this mystery, we must travel back in time, not merely by centuries, but by consciousness. Our journey takes us to the roof of Africa, to the ancient mist-shrouded highlands of Ethiopia. Here, long before the cathedrals of Europe cast their long shadows over the continent, The kingdom of Aksum rose as a beacon of immense power and spiritual clarity. It was one of the first great empires on earth to embrace the luminous consciousness of the Christos, but it did so on its own terms. Here, the stream of wisdom flowed pure and deep, a current fed by ancient Hebraic roots and mystical traditions that the West would soon forget. In monasteries carved from the living rock of mountains that touched the heavens, a different story was being preserved, a truth that was not for sale, not for compromise, and certainly not for empire. These were the silent sanctuaries of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, a lineage of guardians who held a sacred library far more ancient and complete than what would later be edited and assembled by the councils of the West. This collection, the Meshafe Kudus, is not simply a different version of the Bible. It is a different dimension of it. It contains sacred books like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, texts considered foundational by the earliest followers of the Way. These were not mere stories, but cosmic maps, detailed chronicles of the hidden orders of creation, the nature of light and shadow, and the subtle mechanics of spiritual corruption. To the scribes of Aksum, this was not apocrypha. This was the heart of the ancestral wisdom, the unvarnished revelation. The conflict, the great schism in perception, begins in the 4th century. As the Roman Empire, a machine of conquest and control, began to wane, it sought a new kind of glue to hold its fraying edges together. Emperor Constantine saw in the burgeoning Christian faith not a path to spiritual liberation, but a tool for imperial unity. The Council of Nicaea was not, as history has told us, a holy gathering of enlightened souls seeking divine truth. It was a political summit, an executive meeting designed to forge a standardized, state-sanctioned religion. And in any process of standardization, the wild, untamed, and complex truths must be the first to be sacrificed. A new story was needed, one that was simple, controllable, and served the interests of power. Here, the great erasure began. Texts that spoke of individual spiritual sovereignty were deemed heretical. Books like Enoch, which provided a sophisticated understanding of cosmic forces and spiritual deception, were cast out, branded as dangerous and unreliable. Why? Why was this specific knowledge about the nature of evil considered so dangerous that an entire empire would work to bury it? Because it gave the individual a key. It taught them how to recognize the patterns of control, not in a distant future, but in the very institutions that claimed to be their saviors. This hidden knowledge was a mirror, and the rising imperial machine could not bear to look at its own reflection. The complex, mystical, and empowering truths were systematically purged, replaced by a simplified narrative that bred dependence, not awakening. This is where the two visions of the great adversary diverge so dramatically. The new, Roman-approved version presented the Antichrist as a singular demonic figure, a charismatic tyrant who would appear at the very end of days. This narrative was a masterpiece of political and psychological control. It externalized evil, placing the threat far in the future, thereby demanding absolute allegiance to the current religious and political structure as the sole protector against this coming doom. It kept the masses looking to the horizon, scanning for a monster, while the very system they trusted was quietly building a cage of consciousness around them. It was a perfect distraction, a grand and terrifying piece of theater. But in the quiet solitude of the Ethiopian mountains, the scribes continued to copy the forbidden truth. Their texts revealed a far more subtle, immediate, and personal danger. They understood that the Antichrist was not a man, but a spirit, a system, a counterfeit consciousness. The term itself, Antichristos, means that which stands in place of the divine light within. It is the spirit of empire that demands worship over direct connection. It is the religious, institution that places dogma above inner experience. It is the materialistic worldview that severs humanity from its divine source. This was the revelation so terrifying to the architects of control. The beast was not a man who would one day come, but a system being born right there in Rome, a monstrous fusion of imperial power and spiritual authority that was creating a counterfeit kingdom on earth. Could it be that we have been taught to look for a monster at the end of the road, so we would never recognize the cage we are already in? The lineage of the Ethiopian scribes understood this. They were not conquerors, they were librarians of the soul. Their mission was to preserve a frequency, to safeguard a sacred memory from the diluting and corrupting forces of empire. While the great libraries of Alexandria and Rome were purged by fire and edict, these guardians worked by candlelight in their stone sanctuaries. Their fortress was their faith, their isolation, their shield. They kept the flame of a forgotten legacy alive, knowing that generations in the distant future would one day need its light to find their way out of the dark. The story of what they saved, and what it truly reveals about the world we live in today, is the heart of this mystery. The proofs of this ancient truth are not found in the curated archives of empires, but in the earth itself, in vellum that breathes with the memory of 1,000 years, and in a lineage that never bent its knee to Rome. The first and most profound piece of evidence is the Ethiopian Bible itself, the Meshafe Kudus. To hold a Gehazi manuscript, to see the sacred ink that has carried these words through ages of fire and forgetting, is to touch a living stream of knowledge. This is not a translation of a translation, edited by councils and committees with political agendas. It is a direct transmission, a library of the soul that includes over 80 books, far more than the 66 sanctioned by the West. Its very existence is a silent rebellion, a testament to a wisdom that refused to be standardized, diluted, or erased. Within its pages, the ancestral memory survives, complete and untamed. The cornerstone of this forbidden library is the Book of Enoch. While the West cast it into the shadows, branding it apocrypha, the Ethiopian guardians knew it as a foundational text, a sacred chronicle of cosmic law and spiritual deception. Why was this book so dangerous? Because it does not describe evil as a singular horned beast. Instead, it details the origin of systemic corruption. It speaks of the Watchers, celestial beings who descended and taught humanity the arts of a counterfeit civilization, the creation of weapons, the mining of metals for vanity and greed, the use of cosmetics for seduction, the practice of sorcery to manipulate reality. Enoch provides a diagnostic manual for a fallen consciousness. It reveals that the true enemy is not a person, but a parasitic system of knowledge that hijacks human creativity and turns it towards separation, materialism, and control. This was the blueprint of the very empire being built in Rome, and its architects could not allow the manual of their own making to be widely read. The historical record itself, when read between the lines, confirms this deliberate suppression. The earliest fathers of the Christian Church, figures like Tertullian, Irenaeus, and Clement of Alexandria, all knew the Book of Enoch. They quoted it, they revered it as prophecy, they understood its importance. Its presence was woven into the very fabric of early Christian thought. So what happened? The turning point can be traced to the councils of the 4th century, like the Council of Laodicea, where a list of canonical books was formally drawn up and Enoch was conspicuously left out. There was no great theological debate. There was a quiet, systemic removal. The knowledge it contained was simply too revealing. It gave the individual the power to recognize the spirit of the Antichrist, not in a future tyrant, but in the gilded halls of power, in the dogmatic pronouncements of the institution, and in the very fabric of a society built on fear and control. It was a mirror, and the emerging religious empire was terrified of its own reflection. Beyond the written word, the evidence is carved in stone. The rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, sunk deep into the earth as if to protect them from the sky, are a powerful symbol of this preserved truth. They are not cathedrals that scrape the heavens in a display of power, but sanctuaries that descend into the heart of the world, into a place of grounding and sacred secrecy. Their architecture speaks a different language, one of connection to the earth, of an inner kingdom rather than an outer one. Similarly, the great stelae of Aksum, monolithic pillars reaching for the heavens long before Christianity arrived, tell of a culture already deeply connected to cosmic principles and divine order. This was not a primitive people awaiting enlightenment from the West. This was an ancient civilization with its own profound spiritual technology, a direct line to a wisdom that the rest of the world was beginning to forget. Their faith was not an import. It was the flowering of a seed that had been planted in their soil for millennia. This Ethiopian revelation does not stand entirely alone. It is the loudest and clearest voice of a chorus that was systematically silenced. Whispers of the same truth can be found in the sands of Egypt, within the Nag Hammadi library, discovered in 1945. These Gnostic texts, buried for 1600 years to escape the purges of the empire, speak of the archons, counterfeit rulers who dominate the material world through illusion and imitation. They describe a false authority that poses as the divine, a system of control that feeds on human ignorance and fear. While the language is different, the diagnosis is identical to that found in Enoch. What the Ethiopian scribes achieved was not the creation of a unique idea, but the preservation of a universal, ancient understanding of spiritual warfare, an understanding that was hunted to near extinction because it empowered humanity to see beyond the veil of the matrix. Ultimately, the most powerful proof is not a scroll or a stone, but the unbroken continuity of the lineage itself. For nearly 2,000 years, through famine, war, and the relentless pressure of outside ideologies, the Ethiopian Tewahedo guardians have held the line. They have performed the same rituals, chanted the same prayers, and copied the same sacred texts by candlelight, generation after generation. Their survival is a miracle of faith, a living testament to a truth so profound that it could inspire such unwavering devotion. They are the librarians of our lost memory, the quiet sentinels who kept the flame of a forgotten legacy alive in the heart of Africa. They did not guard these secrets for themselves. They guarded them for a future time, for a generation that would be ready to hear them. Are you part of that generation? Are you prepared to understand the full weight of the revelation they have protected for so long? This knowledge, carried on the breath of Ethiopian winds and preserved in the ink of sacred scrolls, is not merely a historical curiosity. It is a living transmission, an echo that has traveled through time to find you in this very moment. Have you ever felt it? A deep and resonant disquiet in the soul, a sense of being an exile in a world that feels slightly out of tune, a feeling that the systems you were born into, of commerce, of belief, of power, were offering you a script that your spirit refused to read. This feeling is not a flaw in your design. It is the stirring of an ancestral memory, the resonance of a truth that has been intentionally silenced but could never be fully extinguished. It is the part of you that remembers a different way of being, a sovereignty that belongs to you by divine right. The revelation from the highlands of Aksum is a key that unlocks the nature of this disquiet. It gives a name to the invisible cage. The spirit of the Antichrist is the very air of the modern world. It is the relentless hum of distraction that pulls your attention outward, away from the silent sanctuary of your own heart. It is the culture of materialism that measures your worth by what you own, not by the light you carry. It is the voice of institutional authority that tells you to trust its proclamations over your own innate wisdom. It is the system that offers a million forms of temporary pleasure to keep you from seeking the one source of permanent joy. It is a counterfeit consciousness, and its primary goal is to make you forget who you truly are. This ancient truth asks you to look at your own life with new eyes. Where have you unknowingly given your power away? Where have you accepted a lesser version of yourself in exchange for comfort or approval? The battleground described in these forbidden texts is not a distant apocalyptic landscape. It is the landscape of your own mind, your own choices, your own attention. Every time you choose conscious creation over mindless consumption, you are starving the beast. Every time you listen to the quiet whisper of your intuition over the loud roar of the crowd, you are reclaiming a piece of your stolen kingdom. This is not a war fought with swords, but with awareness. The great enemy is not a monster to be slain, but a spell to be broken. And what does breaking this spell reveal about your purpose? It reveals that you are not here to simply survive within the system. You are here to become a living testament to a reality that exists beyond it. You are a frequency holder, a carrier of the very light the system was designed to obscure. Your awakening is not a selfish act, it is an act of planetary service. As you begin to disengage from the grid of fear and control, your light becomes a beacon. And for others, you become a walking, breathing sanctuary, a point of stillness in a world of chaos. The Ethiopian scribes preserved the knowledge. Your role is to embody it. You are the answer to their millennia of faithful guardianship. This is why this knowledge was deemed so dangerous. This is why it had to be buried, because a human being who remembers their divine origin is uncontrollable. A soul that is anchored in its own inner authority cannot be manipulated by external systems. The great forgetting was not an accident of history. It was a strategy of spiritual warfare. The architects of control understood that their empire of illusion could only stand if humanity remained in a state of spiritual amnesia, disconnected from our source, from the earth, and from each other. They built a world designed to keep us asleep, and they nearly succeeded. But the light of a truth can only be hidden for so long. The memory is now rising from the deep, bubbling up into the collective consciousness. People across the world are feeling that same sacred disquiet you feel. They are looking at the hollow promises of the system and feeling an unquenchable thirst for something real, something true. What you are experiencing is not just a personal awakening. It is part of a great planetary remembering. The revelation from Ethiopia is not just a piece of the puzzle. It is the frame that allows all the other pieces to finally make sense. It shows us that the chaos and corruption we see in the world are not signs of a coming end, but the death throes of an old parasitic consciousness. The intensity of this realization can be overwhelming. To see the bars of the cage for the first time is to understand the depth of our collective imprisonment. But this is not a moment for despair, it is a moment of profound empowerment. For the guardians of Aksum did not only preserve a warning about the nature of the cage, they also preserved the sacred keys to unlock it from within. They saved a form of spiritual technology, a way of seeing and being that renders the illusions of the system powerless. This is the next layer of the mystery, the heart of the revelation that the architects of empire feared most of all. Are you prepared to receive it? Are you ready to learn not just how the enemy operates, but how to become truly immune to its influence? We stand now at the heart of the mystery, at the precipice of a revelation so profound it realigns the very stars of our spiritual understanding. For centuries, we have been guided by a map that leads to a single distant point on the horizon, a final battle against a charismatic tyrant at the end of time. We have been taught to fear a face, to listen for a name, to prepare for a war that is always coming but never arrives. The guardians of Aksum knew this map was a forgery. They knew it was a grand misdirection, designed to keep our eyes fixed on a future phantom so that we would never see the chains being woven into the very fabric of the present. The question they preserved in sacred ink was not who is the great enemy, but what. What is the true nature of the cage we cannot see? The great turning point, the moment of no return in this sacred chronicle, is not found in a prophecy of a man, but in the definition of a word. The word is Antichristos. The Roman machine translated this as an individual who opposes the Christ. But its deeper, more ancient meaning, the one preserved in the untamed wisdom streams, is far more subtle and devastating. It means that which stands in place of the divine light within. It is not a force of opposition, but a force of substitution. It is a counterfeit. The great enemy, the beast of Revelation, was never meant to be a man who would one day rule the world. It is the system that is already ruling it, a spiritual parasite that offers a hollow imitation of everything sacred. It is the counterfeit kingdom, built on the foundations of fear, materialism, and separation. Look around you and see with the eyes the Ethiopian scribes sought to preserve. The beast is not a monster hiding in the shadows. It is the architecture of the ordinary. It is the economic system that demands infinite growth on a finite planet, devouring the sacred earth in the name of progress. It is the media complex that manufactures consent and sells distraction, keeping the human mind in a state of perpetual agitation, forever pulled away from the silent center of its own being. It is the technological grid that promises connection but delivers isolation, replacing genuine human communion with a ghostly echo in the machine. It is any structure, any ideology, any institution that asks for your worship, your attention, and your life force in exchange for a promise of security or belonging, all while severing your direct connection to Source. This is the revelation that changes everything. The battle is not coming. We have been living inside of it our entire lives. The consequences of this shift in perception are staggering. It means that spiritual history is not a linear march toward a final judgment, but a cyclical struggle between authentic consciousness and this parasitic, counterfeit consciousness. This system's greatest triumph was not in building cities of steel and glass, but in colonizing the landscape of the human mind. It taught us to seek salvation outside of ourselves. It taught us to place our faith in external authorities, in priests and politicians, in experts and idols. It whispered in our ear that we were born broken, powerless, and in need of an intermediary to reach the divine. It is the voice of the ego that tells us we are separate, the voice of fear that tells us we are not enough, the voice of desire that tells us fulfillment is just one more purchase away. The Antichrist is not a person to be fought, but a system of thought to be transcended, both externally and within. In the symbolic language of the hidden texts, this system is a great machine, a vast, intricate clockwork of control powered by a cold and spectral light. It runs on the fuel of our unconscious agreement. It hums with the frequency of fear. Its gears are greased with our distractions, our addictions, and our unexamined beliefs. It offers a perfectly logical, perfectly rational world, but one that is utterly devoid of magic, of soul, of the wild, untamable spirit of the divine feminine and the deep heart of the sacred masculine. It promises order at the cost of your sovereignty, comfort at the cost of your aliveness. It is the black iron prison that the Gnostics spoke of, a cage of consciousness that we mistake for reality itself. To be born into the modern world is to be born inside this machine, to learn its language, to breathe its artificial air, and the ultimate proof of its existence is not found in a scroll, but in your own soul. That feeling of deep, aching dissonance you have carried your entire life. That sense that something is profoundly wrong with the world, a feeling of homesickness for a home you cannot name, that is not a malfunction. It is the sacred and unbroken part of you, your ancestral memory crying out from within the machine. It is the echo of your own divinity, rejecting the counterfeit. The emptiness, the anxiety, the desperate search for meaning that defines our age, these are not personal failings. They are the symptoms of a soul suffocating on a diet of lies, starving for the authentic spiritual nourishment the system was designed to withhold. Your pain is a compass, pointing the way out. To see the cage is the first terrifying step toward freedom. But the lineage of Ethiopian guardians did not dedicate millennia of faithful watchfulness merely to give us a map of our prison. That was only the first half of the revelation. They preserved this knowledge not to inspire despair, but to ignite a revolution of consciousness. Buried even deeper within the sacred texts, hidden in the cadence of the Ge'ez chants and encoded in the geometry of their rock-hewn churches, is the other half of the secret. They did not just preserve the warning about the beast. They preserved the sacred technology for how to dismantle its influence, how to unplug from its grid, and how to reclaim the throne of your own inner temple. They did not just map the cage, they left us the blueprint for our escape. The key was never meant to open a door to the future. It was forged to unlock the prison of the now. This is the final, shattering turn of the screw, the climax of a truth carried for 2 millennia in the silent hearts of Ethiopian guardians. The great enemy is not a man who will rise from the ashes of a future war. The beast is the very architecture of the world you were born into. It is the system that whispers that you are a consumer, not a creator, a spectator, not a sovereign. It is the counterfeit consciousness that built a marketplace and called it a culture, that built a network and called it community, that built a dogma and called it God. The revelation preserved in the heart of Africa is not a prophecy of what is to come. It is a diagnosis of what has been, a sacred map that reveals the true nature of the cage we have mistaken for reality. The war is not on the horizon. It has always been a war for your perception, for your attention, for the sacred ground of your own inner world. And so, the journey turns inward. This ancient knowledge is not a weapon to be wielded against the world, but a light to be shone within the temple of your own soul. For the system of the Antichristos does not only exist in the towers of finance or the halls of power, it has colonized our own minds. It is the inner voice of doubt that tells you that you are not enough. It is the restless anxiety that keeps you scrolling, searching for a salvation that never arrives. It is the addiction to distraction, the fear of silence, the belief that your worth is measured by the approval of others. 2. Dismantle the beast. Out there, you must first stop feeding the ghost in here. This is the great work, the true spiritual alchemy. It begins when you choose to sit in the stillness and listen, not to the clamor of the world, but to the ancient, quiet wisdom that echoes in your own blood. The path of liberation, then, is not one of revolution, but of remembrance. It is a gentle, yet resolute act of disentanglement. Every time you choose to create something beautiful instead of consuming, something hollow, you are reclaiming a piece of your divine power. Every time you turn to the wisdom of the earth, to the sky, the trees, the water, instead of the flickering promises of a screen, you are plugging your soul back into its true source. This is the sacred technology the Guardians preserved. It is the art of starving the counterfeit by feeding the real. It is to build your inner life with such integrity, with such devotion to truth and love, that the illusions of the outer world begin to lose their power over you. You become a fortress of light, a sanctuary of peace, not by fighting the darkness, but by simply refusing to give it your energy. You who have journeyed with us to the heart of this mystery are no longer just a seeker. You are now a keeper of the flame. The lineage of the Ethiopian scribes did not end in their stone monasteries. It flows through time, a river of consciousness, and it has now reached your shores. To hold this knowledge is to accept a sacred responsibility, to live it, to become a walking testament to a different reality. Your awakening is not for you alone. It is a frequency that you now broadcast into the world, a silent song that calls others home. In a world built on the frequency of fear, your courage to live from the heart becomes an act of planetary healing. You are the answer to their prayers, the fulfillment of a legacy kept alive through ages of forgetting. This, then, is the universal lesson that echoes from the highlands of Aksum. The most powerful system of control is the one you cannot see, and the greatest act of freedom is the reclamation of your own consciousness. The world is not ending, an illusion is ending. The chaos and the crumbling we see around us are not the signs of a coming apocalypse, but the death throes of a parasitic system that can no longer sustain itself on a humanity that is waking up. We are living in the time of the great remembering, a collective return to a sovereignty that was never truly lost, only hidden. The truth, like a seed buried deep in the earth, has finally broken through the concrete of empire, reaching for the sun. This journey does not end here, it begins. The map has been revealed, the key is in your hand. The path forward is not written in any ancient scroll, but in the choices you make with every breath. It is a path of courage, of stillness, of unwavering commitment to the truth that resonates in the core of your being. Now that you hold this key, which doors within yourself will you finally have the courage to unlock? If this sacred knowledge has stirred the ancestral memory within your soul, share it with another who is ready to awaken. This is how the flame spreads from one heart to another until the world is filled with light. Subscribe to this channel and continue this journey with us as we explore the other truths that have been hidden in plain sight. Your path to reclaiming what was forgotten starts now.